Breaking news out of college basketball, Auburn locking up head coach Bruce Pearl with a long-term contract extension. Pearl's in his 8th season at Auburn. Stadium reports it's an 8-year deal for the Tigers head coach. He led Auburn to their first Final Four appearance in school history in 2019. This season, Auburn at #1 in the AP poll for the first time in program history. The news comes on the eve of Auburn's Big 12 SEC Challenge game against Oklahoma on Saturday afternoon. We welcome in now our college basketball experts and the hosts of Eye on College Basketball podcast, Matt Norlander and Gary Parrish. Guys, thanks for the time. We talked about how good this Auburn team is. Matt, why did they agree to this extension now?
Well, listen, Auburn hasn't lost a basketball game in more than 2 months. So you get to that point where you've got Auburn into the top 25 and then into the top 10, then into the top 5. And clearly, discussions were ongoing in recent weeks. And then moving to #1, it had never been at that point before. With Chris Mack parting ways with Louisville early this week. Yes, there was some brief noise, but I want to be clear on this. And I reported this a couple of days ago for CBS. I was told by a pretty good source connected to Louisville that Louisville was not reaching out to Bruce Pearl, and he was not a viable candidate to be the next in line at that university. So, yes, this is well-timed, and I do think that Chris Mack splitting off from Louisville perhaps even accelerated matters there. But this does not come as a surprise to me. It's clearly significant. Bruce Pearl is 61. He will be 62 when it gets time for March. So this contract, in effect, should keep him at Auburn for the remainder of his coaching career for however long that is. And it's obviously well-earned. You can fairly say that even though he's not the longest tenured coach in the history of men's Auburn basketball, with what he's been able to do this season, getting to a Final Four in 2019 GP, I think it's fair to call him the greatest coach in the history of men's Auburn basketball. And with that, this deal seems fair, and this is the market at play. Auburn wanted to make sure it kept its guy, and so long as Pearl is there, it seems like he's going to have Auburn interesting and nationally relevant in most years.
Yeah, there's no question that this was expedited by the opening at Louisville earlier this week. What's interesting is that, as Norlander has alluded to, it's unlikely that Bruce Pearl would have been a realistic candidate at Louisville anyway. And it's also unlikely that he would have wanted to leave Auburn to take the Louisville job. But in that profession or any other profession, you take advantage of leverage anytime you have it, and that is what Bruce and his representation are doing right here. The truth is, at the end of the day, when Bruce took the Auburn job, there were some big questions that he had to ask himself. Can you recruit here? Can you win here? If you win here enough, will people even care? But at this point, all of those questions have been answered. He's got 2 5-star prospects starting in his front court, one of whom, Jabari Smith, could be the #1 pick in the 2022 NBA draft. Can you recruit here? Clearly you can. Can you win here? Sure. Went to the Final Four in 2019. He's won an SEC title. He's got the team ranked at #1 in the country right now. You can win there. And will people care if you win at Auburn, which before Bruce didn't have a lot of college basketball history? I was there last Saturday in Auburn Arena for the Tigers' big win over Kentucky. It was sold out, rowdy, as good as it gets. Once you figure out that you can recruit to a place, win at a place, and people will care when you do it, then it's just, as long as they've got the money to keep you, and money is not a deciding factor, it's probably smart to just stay right where you are. And Bruce Pearl, in agreeing to this 8-year contract, like Norlander said, is probably going to be able to finish his career coaching in the SEC at the program that he's currently got ranked #1 in the AP poll.
And Gary, the Tigers are on a 16-game winning streak, longest active in Division I hoops, best 20-game start since 1998-99 season. What is Pearl doing to get his team to play at such a high level?
I think he's doing what he's always done. I mean, he's one of the great college basketball coaches of the past 20 years. This is a guy who took Tennessee to #1 in the AP poll for the first time in school history back in 2008. And now he's taken Auburn to #1 in the AP poll for the first time in school history. The list of people who have accomplished those things at multiple schools is very, very short. He's an incredible motivator. He's an incredible salesman, but also on game day, he can do the job. I was in his huddles, Sherry, as being a veteran sideline reporter, you get into those huddles and different coaches handle them different ways. And Bruce is brilliant in those spots. Close game, a game with a big margin between the two teams. He's very good at handling those situations. And, you know, the key is he's put together a roster that's built to win. And he's excelling with it in a way that is probably a little surprising. I don't want to have revisionist history here. I don't think Norlander and I did a single podcast in the offseason where we talked about Auburn being the best team in the country. But he has certainly made Auburn among the best teams in the country, the team that has the best resume in the sport as of this moment. And obviously it's a legitimate national title contender.
Yeah, Parrish and I talked about this on a recent episode of Eye on College Basketball, where I referenced a preseason conversation I had on the record with Bruce Pearl about what he thought this team would be this season. Because heading in, it was the likes of Kentucky, Arkansas, Tennessee, those were the team, Alabama, those were the four teams that were considered the most likely teams to win the SEC. And then Auburn was viewed as an NCAA tournament level team, but not top 25 level. And I remember Pearl telling me, I want to see what we can get out of Walker Kessler right away, because he was at North Carolina last season. And I am going to heap all of the credit and praise on Parrish right here, right now, because Parrish did say in the preseason on multiple occasions that Walker Kessler had a really good shot to be among the most improved players in the country. That has actually happened. Walker Kessler is one of the 5 best defenders in the sport, and he's doing so much on the offensive end. He has been transformed by Pearl and his staff. And so Pearl basically told me, I think we've got a good chance, but I got to see how we develop here. Jabari Smith has a lot of talent. Don't know how aggressive and successful he'll be early. Well, now look at Jabari Smith. Like, it's him and Paolo Banchero, 1A, 1B, who's going to be the #1 pick in June, and that's been a huge factor. But I also want to point out that Bruce Pearl has had 4 NBA picks the previous 3 seasons, 3 of which have been freshman one and doneers in there, and Jabari Smith is going to be the next one. So it's been this great combination of incoming high-level talent, but also some veterans. You know, Wendell Green Jr. has been huge for them. Katie Johnson is kind of irrepressible in terms of on-court presence and spirit and what he does for that team. And I'll just close with this. Auburn, they're getting a lot of run, rightfully so, right now because they're the #1 team in the country. I genuinely believe that this team is going to be able to compose itself and present itself as one of the 3 most likely national championship teams by the time we get to the NCAA tournament, even if and when they lose, Sherry, 2 or 3 or 4 more games before we get there, because they just do so much well on both ends of the floor. No, they're not super elite on offense, and they're not super elite on defense, but they have so many scoring options, a lot of size, a lot of composure, and Bruce Pearl has been to a Final Four. Auburn is not only good, they're extremely watchable, and that's a great thing for college basketball this season, to kind of have a little bit of a new kid on the block, a little bit, and the Tigers certainly set up well heading into February and what will be a pretty compelling top end of the SEC.
Gary, what do you think? What is this team's ceiling? As Matt said, it's almost February, meaning it's almost March. Obviously, they have aspirations of being a national champion. And we do want to add, they have the 5th best odds at plus 1,200 to win the championship. They were plus 6,000 the start of the season. So, Gary, what do you think?
The ceiling is cut nets on the first Monday night in April down in New Orleans. I mean, this team is obviously that good, is obviously good enough to do that. Jabari Smith is the star because he's been terrific at the collegiate level, but also because he's a real candidate to be the #1 pick in the 2022 NBA draft. But the truth is, he's the only freshman in the rotation. Everybody else that matters is a non-freshman. And so, you know, Bill Self, the Kansas Hall of Fame coach, in advance of Saturday's game against Kentucky, he had a press conference earlier today, and he was talking about Kentucky more than he was talking about Auburn, but I think it applies. Bill Self said talent trumps experience. You would always rather have talent than experience, but what you really want is experienced talent. And he was talking about Kentucky, but you can say the same thing about Auburn. They've got NBA talent in Walker Kessler, Jabari Smith, Alan Flanagan, and then they've got older guys who are just really good college players, and the roster comes together incredibly nicely. This team checks every box. I can't promise you they'll win the national title because it's a single elimination tournament. We'll see, as always. But if you were putting together a list of 5, 6 teams that can actually do it, Auburn's got to be on that list somewhere.
Well, it is called March Madness for a reason. We appreciate it. Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander, thank you for the time. And make sure you download and subscribe to the Eye on College Basketball podcast and get more from Matt and Gary as we are deep diving into the college basketball season with February just around the corner. They just released a podcast on Friday afternoon, another coming your way on Sunday. Make sure you download and subscribe today.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.